The cemetery memorializes the people who served our country in some way, whether it be in war or recipients of the Purple Heart or Silver Star honors. The viewers are asked to show respect to those people and remember those who have fallen for our country. This monument is located in Arlington, Virginia, on the property once owned by Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Its hilly landscape overlooks the National Mall with specific views of the Washington Monument and Capitol. Emotionally, this is a very sacred space as it is a cemetery. Many come to pay respects to family members and other veterans, so it is very important to be calm and respectful while walking around. This sacredness fits into the landscape because it's very isolated from other buildings. The trees and hills block off views so the visitors can be fully present at the cemetery. Although the first military burial occurred on May 13, 1864, the Arlington National Cemetery had a complex series of events that shaped the function that the land would serve in later years. Initially, the land was owned by Washington Parke Custis, the step-grandson of George Washington. Before his death, he willed the land to his daughter, Mary Ann Randolph Custis, who would go on to marry Robert E. Lee. With the arrival of the Civil War, Lee abandoned the property, leaving it for federal use during the war. 3 forts were constructed there, as well as the Freedmen's Village, an estate to assist newly freed slaves. Freedmen's Village provided educational, employment, and medical assistance. Following the war, there was a tax dispute, resulting in Lee's family formally having to turn the land over to the government, which upsetted Lee's son, who brought the case to the Supreme Court in United States versus Lee. By this time, the land contained the graves of over 6,000 Union soldiers. He won the case and gained back the land, but in later years he would sell it back to the federal government. By June of 1864, the War Department designated the land as a national cemetery, as a result of an increased number of fatalities from the war. In 2010, there was an onset controversy following the discovery of mismarked graves. In some cases, graves were found to have several bodies stacked on top of one another. Those in charge of management at the cemetery refused to cooperate with the investigation. This overcrowding in the cemetery provoked the public to reflect on the mass numbers of men and women involved in war efforts over the years, many of whom are disregarded and not credited for their service. This next clip is an interview with a veteran.
It brings some emotion back.
Do you mind explaining how that is?
Well, I've got some friends there. I've got a friend that will be buried here. He got shot down at 65 to 72.
And what does this mean for you then, coming to the cemetery?
Well, it's a healing. Probably get more healing from being like that.
The cemetery was split into 70 sections. Within those sections, the gravestones are aligned in different ways. For government-issue stones, the size is 24 inches tall, 4 inches thick, 13 inches wide, with 8 feet vertically until the next grave, which is the most commonly seen grave at the Arlington Cemetery. There are also groups of stones that families purchase which are more elegant and larger. These stones could be grouped with other elegant graves but are typically along the side of government-issued ones. The designated and more hidden gravestones and tombs belong to higher-ranking officials and persons such as presidents and generals. For the most part, the monument as a whole is very organized. The writing on the gravestones are facts as it states who died and when they died. There are numbers on the stones which give the cemetery order, and this makes it easier for visitors to find their loved ones. The numbers are small because they do not symbolize importance. The names and dates hold the most significance and have a bigger font in order to catch the viewer's eye while walking through. Every gravestone has at least a name and date on it, so the written elements coincide with the visual ones. Throughout the cemetery, there are overlooks that have famous quotes in stone that are quite visually pleasing. The Arlington Cemetery evokes a lot of emotion because of its burial ground, where families and visitors come to respectfully mourn and appreciate the deceased. The Arlington Cemetery is based upon credibility, for it is exclusively for those who have served and honored our country, and veterans that are still buried there today. The cemetery is organized into lots ranging 1 through 50 and has an abundance of interesting statistics and calculations for the number of people buried, separating them into categories like war nurses, ranks in the military, and so on. There are also special strategically placed tombs for presidents and their wives. The main focal point and metaphor for the cemetery is the eternal flame, which is placed by the burial of President John F. Kennedy. This eternal flame has been burning since 1963 and looks over the 624 acres of tombstones for the fallen veterans. This flame represents the forever lasting impact of our veterans and the physical representation of their undying memory. Someone visiting the monument might take a moment to respectfully look at the final resting place of over 400,000 men and women lying perfectly in rows over 624 acres of land. People in the community appreciate the importance of the land, but don't necessarily appreciate it more than non-community members.
The first question is, what are you guys doing here today? Like, what's your purpose for being here?
Okay, this is my sister and this is my friend forever.
Okay.
And we're just left our husbands at home, and we're here in we used to live in DC. My husband was stationed at Fort Belvoir.
Okay.
And so this is just we doing a road trip together, and we thought we'd come here.
Okay.
We wanted to see the tomb of the unknown soldier and Kennedy's grave.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We're from Minnesota. She's from Arizona.
Okay. Do any of you guys have any like family buried here or friends?
No.
No. And when you're walking around, does this seeing all the gravestones like evoke any specific emotions out of
Yes,
you guys?
yes, because
No.
all of our husbands have been in the military.
Okay.
They all
During
suffer
the
from
Vietnam War.
and they suffer from PTSD.
Yeah.
And we remember the day that President Kennedy was shot and killed.
Yeah.
And it brings back memories.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting us interview you.
Thank you.
Yes, the monument is still as much effective today as it was then. We learned from the people we interviewed and reading the information boards that there are still people buried at the cemetery and services are still held for them. On average, there is about 25 burials a day and are estimated to be buried there until 2041, where it is predicted that the Arlington Cemetery will run out of space.